Greetings from a fishing village on the Atlantic coast. You've tuned in to Podcast Portwenn, celebrating the world of Doc Martin unofficially. I'm Chesla Wechsler, and we'll be discussing Doc Martin, the medicine, the mayhem, and the marvelous people of Portwenn. I'm really happy to have three guests who've been on the podcast in other contexts, but who are here today because they have something in common, other than just loving Doc Martin. Kathy, Oliver, and Anneke all traveled to Port Isaac, Cornwall, the original Portwenn, during filming of Doc Martin. Come through and welcome back to Podcast Portwenn.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
It's great to see you guys. So, Anneke, what season or seasons did you visit for?
I have been there for series 7, 8, 9, and 10. But I have to say that during the filming of season 8, I haven't seen anything of the filming. I was in Port Isaac. We had one wonderful time. We spent a lot of time together as well, huh, Kathy?
Yes.
But I didn't see any filming at that week.
That's funny. How about you, Kathy? What seasons were you there for?
Same as Anneke, seasons 7, 8, 9, and 10. I was in Port Isaac for 5 weeks when series 8 was filming.
Wow.
So, and I was even in one of the episodes.
That's very cool. So we'll come back to that. Oliver, which ones were you there for?
My first year was 2011, and I think that was for series 5, the series after she gave birth, when the baby was real young. And then, and then I went back in 2013 and 2015.
Okay. And you guys, a couple of you overlapped, but you didn't all overlap simultaneously?
We have seen each other at least one time.
That's great. And where did you stay, Oliver?
My first year, I stayed at the Slipway. There wasn't much information about where to stay or anything at that point. I wasn't even on Facebook at that time. So we were all through, I guess, a chat room. And I just decided I wanted to go. These British people kept saying they were down there at the filming. And so I went down there by myself. I stayed at Slipway because that was in the show, that it was a real hotel.
Right.
So I stayed there. And then the other 2 times I stayed in cottages.
Okay. How about you, Kathy?
The first time when Oliver was there, we stayed in Louise's cottage, where Martin proposed. We stayed there for a week, and then we stayed in the Folly one, which is the big cottage right next to the surgery. And then the next year we stayed in Northcliffe, which is the white house right across from the surgery. We stayed there for a couple of weeks, and then we moved to Dolphin Cottage, which is on Dolphin Street. And for 2019, we stayed in the Mizzen, which is in Dolphin Street, and then we moved back again to the Folly.
Okay.
We love the Folly, because except that I didn't like driving up there and back.
Yes. How about you, Anneke? Where did you stay?
Well, I stayed in a B&B on Tintagel Terrace the first time, but that B&B doesn't even exist anymore. The building doesn't even exist anymore. There's a very modern new building now. And then I stayed twice at Fern Cottage, which is next to the fish and chips. So in front or across the street from where Oliver and Kathy stayed. And in 2022, I stayed with Kathy in Providence Cottage. That was a nice one with very nice views. You could see the surgery and very nice views on the sea and marvelous sunsets. So it was really a nice place to be. So
Nice.
I even returned there, but that was after the thing was stopped. And I returned there last year as well.
Okay. I'm looking forward to hearing some descriptions of the Folly. I always wondered what was in there.
It's actually a duplex.
Is it?
Yeah, they're 2 separate cottages, but it's one building.
Okay.
Very big cottages, by the way, as well.
Yes, very big. 4 bedrooms, several bathrooms. Very
Wow.
nice. Very nice cottage.
What were some of your favorite places to eat? I'll start with Kathy.
Oh, they're almost all really good to eat. There's Nicky B's if you want a pasty. The Moat is really good. Is it Golden Lion? Now I can't even remember. The one that's just now closing, the pub. And then my favorite place actually was the Chapel Cafe, which, I think it changed owners over the years, but it was always pretty good.
It's still good. They saved our bacon the night that we arrived. It was 8:00 at night. We were starving. And the Chapel Cafe was open, thank goodness. So that was good. How about you, Anneke? What's your favorite?
And then the Port Gavern Hotel is very good as well.
Yeah. What I was going to say, that Port Gavern Hotel is one of my favorites, as well as Fresh from the Sea, which is on top of the hill, where you get marvelous crab salads and sandwiches. So, and I also like the ambience, or the Cornish tea cove, which is the little one at the end of the coastal path. But it has now been closed because the owners are now owning and working at what was previously the Angry Anchovy.
Right. Yep. I saw that. How about you, Oliver? What are your any favorite places that didn't get mentioned?
No, not really, but I did on my last trip when I went back in 2015. I bought fish at the fish market and I cooked.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was really fun.
We were tempted.
Yeah, I did that. And, but yeah, no, all the restaurants. I remember it being a lot of good food. I did enjoy eating at the Slipway too.
Yeah. We ate at Slipway. It was very good. Did you cook any mackerel?
No, I didn't cook mackerel. This fishmonger picked it out for me. But no, it wasn't mackerel.
I had to know. So, Oliver, since we're talking to you, what other places did you visit when you were in Port Isaac or in Cornwall?
Well, the Bob and Moore, which I enjoyed a lot, and St. Michael's Mount, the castle there. That was fun. Let's see. I usually visited other places in England rather than touring Cornwall. I didn't like driving in Cornwall, and you had to drive there in order to get around, and I wasn't comfortable doing that.
How about you, Anneke? Did you visit other places in Cornwall? Or
Yes. I also have been, and together with Kathy, by the way, we visited Bodmin and Moor. We visited. We had a kind of a cream tea, I think, in the pub where Louisa gave birth to James Henry. We went to look for the place where the old Winthrop. What was his name again? The one who the one who was sick, and when Martin was kidnapped by his wife. We went to look for it. We were really very close, but we didn't find it while we were there.
the Wintons?
The Winton, yes, exactly. And I have been to Tintagel also together with Kathy, and I have been to Loo, not the Loo where now Beyond Paradise is filmed, but another small town that is that's on the south side of Cornwall, and very close to that, they filmed the scene where Louisa stranded with the sailing boat, and where actually later we understood that we were very close to that place as well. But Mark Crowley told to us that anyway we wouldn't have been able to reach it because it was on private grounds.
Okay.
So, and what else did we do something else together, Kathy?
Yeah, I'll kick it
No,
to
we
Kathy.
saw-
What else did you visit, Kathy?
Remember when we went out, we hiked over to Portwenn, and that couple led us into Doyden Castle, which is where Sally Tishel kidnapped James and hung out the window. So
Did you get to go in the castle?
yes,
Yep.
yes. I'm trying to think. Trebarwith Strand. We went and had lunch there. It's a beach. I think we went to Pencarrow House.
Yeah.
The
Also,
gardens.
yeah, indeed.
And then I have a couple of other places I went to. The Lost Gardens of Heligan. There's one more, Lanny Hydrock. I don't know how to pronounce it.
I went to Lanhedrock, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. With another fan, we drove to Beaminster and wandered around the upper level of Martin Clunes's farm, where they have their
Buckham Fair.
right. So we went to Boscastle and saw the Witchcraft Museum. Another interesting thing we saw was the Cornwall at War Museum, which is in Tavistock.
Hey.
It doesn't sound interesting, but it was a very, very interesting place.
Oliver, where were you for the filming, like the locations that you saw filming in?
Just in Port Isaac. My first year, there wasn't much going on. And a lady at the hotel, I was having breakfast. She said they're filming out there on that hill. And I dashed out and got him filming him with the baby for that next series. And mostly just around around the doc's house and stuff. I didn't stay long enough to kind of chase them to other places.
Okay. Kathy, how about you?
Oliver, didn't you see the scene where they were up at the top of the hill? And no, I guess they were having the race. And Stanley runs by and no. You were up on the top of the hill and somebody had passed out. I can't remember. I remember you telling us about that.
Oh yeah, that's the scene I saw that was on the hill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's on that day in 2011. That's right. He was tending to somebody who fell out. It must have been for the race, but it wasn't the actual race.
Right.
He didn't have a dislodged testicle?
I don't know. There weren't many people there, and I wasn't an aggressive fan. And when he came over to talk to everybody, two ladies completely dominated his time.
Shoot.
And I'm not a fangirl, never been a fangirl for anything else. So I didn't get a chance to shake his hand or anything that time. I got to shake his hand later on.
Good.
Yeah, when Martin Clunes is around and if he's willing to talk to people, they just swarm on him. So it's hard to get a word in. But I was out one morning early when we were staying at the Folly, and they were setting up a scene at the surgery. And I was the only person out there watching them do that.
That's cool.
I had a short chat with him then. So, that was my time. What else did we see? There were just all kinds of stuff. Like on, 2019, that would have been series 9. Stuart and Louisa in front of the school. A bunch of us were sitting up in the house looking down and watching that.
Okay.
We went to Cranon Beach where they had the surfing lesson. We were there for almost a whole week.
Wow.
Yes, it took that long. And there was one of our group, a couple of our friends, one woman got so badly sunburned that she got sick.
Oh, no.
She was as extra, but they were out on the beach for like the entire time and she got very, very sunburned.
Got to put sunscreen on.
Yeah, but even so, and then you just see little things like Al setting up his pop-up store in front of Caitlin's grocery store.
Okay.
Then 2022, we saw Pinhale hanging around Al's food truck, Louisa's father coming into the village. Yes. Caitlin throwing Bert's things out of the window.
Oh, fun.
Louisa and James, visiting Ruth during Christmas. We didn't really know what was going on and we were told to stay away, but we still could see that. Martin and Louisa, I can't remember the woman's name. She had myasthenia gravis.
Abigail?
Maybe. Her son was
Dylan.
She was worried about her son. Yeah. So what was funny was we saw Martin and Louisa, and obviously they went into the house and then they came back out, and she didn't want him to take care of him because he wasn't a real doctor. And he shouts, "I am a real doctor and a wizard."
Just to be funny.
I think so, because that didn't come out for at the show. You didn't hear him say it. Although you heard him talk about being a wizard at the Wintons, but we didn't see that.
Okay. How about you, Anneke? What did you see filmed? Or what locations were you watching?
A lot of the same as Kathy had seen, of course, but especially in the latter 2 years. I saw the first scene I ever saw was when Ruth and Martin are walking up the hill carrying the cake for the birthday of James Henry. That was my very first scene, and that was also the very first time I met Kathy.
Yes, I remember that.
And we saw in series 7, we saw also the scene on the beach with this dream catcher thing that Louisa got from Danny. We saw, at least I saw, a scene with Van Hale and Janice on top of the hill. And I saw also a scene with Dr. Timoney at that time. Well, what else we saw? We went to the beach, I think at least 3 times that week. To that beach, Trajarnon Beach. to see all the scenes with the surfer dude and Van Hale trying to get lessons. And actually, we saw that the stand-in for Van Hale was Mark Crowley himself because he is a surfer. That was very nice to see. And what else did we see? Well, indeed, but the episode with Louisa going to Ruth, Kathy, that was when they just simply brought Mary to Ruth because they were going to go to the lantern parade.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, what else did we see?
So the Last Christmas in Portwenn was filmed in the warm weather?
That scene, at least, yes, but not many of them anymore. They filmed that normally in February, I think, but it took a long time.
Most of those were filmed early in late February, early
Yeah.
March.
Okay. So they didn't fake create all that snow? Did they actually get some free snow from God?
There was no snow in Port Isaac and Portwenn itself. It was only on the place where he crashed the car, which was in the gardens of Van Carroll. And we have been there. We also recognized where we had been when we visited there. We actually walked along the tree where he crashed his car.
Oh, funny. Yep.
Of course, we didn't know that yet because the scene was not yet broadcasted.
Sure.
But in Van Carroll, we also saw this special tree. Yeah?
The special tree.
The kissing tree.
The kissing tree with
After the
the
concert.
scene where he,
Yeah, you're in like.
yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Which is actually a rhododendron.
It looks like a shrubbery.
It is.
Yeah.
It's huge.
So Kathy, I'm going to hit you first with the wonderful question of what was it like to be there?
Just a whole lot of fun. I mean, with all the other fans just hanging out. I mean, yes, it was cool to watch filming. It was very cool. But after a while, it gets very tiresome after a while. I realized, the one scene where I was an extra and it was just happenstance. We happened to be there and, Nigel Cole said, "Could you go stand over there?" I said, okay. But it took a long time. And I thought, I don't think I'd want to be an extra because it would just take forever. But, what I remember most is going and getting together for dinner in various people's houses, just hanging out, going out to dinner in various places and getting to know other people, getting to know the other fans from all over the world. And it was just a lot of fun.
That's
And then
cool.
I like to wander through all of the little streets and alleyways and see where I never got lost, but it was pretty cool.
Yeah. How about you, Anneke? What was it like?
Yeah.
Yes.
I found it terrific, especially because it was at the base, it wasn't even myself who decided to go to Port Isaac, but it were my colleagues who said, if you're talking all the time about those fans over there. If you don't book a ticket tonight, we will do it for you. So that was the first thing. And then I was so lucky to see a lot of other fans right away because I traveled all the times that I went there, I traveled all alone. The first time I took a plane and I rented a car, but all the other times I came with my own car from the Netherlands. Only in 2017 I brought my sister-in-law, but she was in the end she also had a lot of fun with all of us, waiting if we could see something, which we didn't that year. But yeah, just what Kathy said. So you met a lot of people from all over the world, and it is sometimes very long days, but a lot of fun.
Yeah. How about you, Oliver?
Well, I enjoyed being with the other fans, especially 2011. I was all by myself. Nobody was staying at the hotel that was a Doc Martin band. They were just people I chatted with and stuff. And they were like, "Oh, you're here for that." It was very unusual for somebody from the United States to come over there at that point. For Doc Martin. And but the scenery, you can't beat it. The weather's sunnier than the rest of England most of the time. And most of the time when I was there, the weather was good. So I didn't have to deal with any of those. I remember one time I learned about the tide. I was kind of out. I had walked out a little bit and I was walking back and it came in quickly and I was I started to walk back when I kind of noticed I'm not an ocean person, so I didn't grow up on the ocean or a boating person. So I'm not really that familiar. The tide, all of a sudden, the water was splashing up much higher, than it had been.
Oh boy.
And I really learned my lesson.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Who did you guys meet associated with the show? I'll start with Oliver since I think you got there earliest.
Well, I met Martin, and I met his wife Philippa. I had written her because she was the producer. I had written her about possibly doing a convention of Doc Martin fans in Port Isaac, and I had it all thought out. It was quite a presentation, and I had a friend who at that time was a Doc Martin friend from England who helped me with it, and we presented it to her. So she knew me. And then on my last trip, maybe it was 2015, I actually met her, which was a big thrill.
Yeah.
She remembered me, and we chatted for a while.
I would love to meet her, just to shake her hand, because
Yeah.
not only are they producing this fantastic content, but negotiating with all these other countries to put it on and everything, but she produced one of my absolute favorite movies, which is Sliding Doors. And yeah, it's a great movie, but just, I would love to shake her hand. Anyway, that's cool.
Yeah, so that was kind of the biggest thrill, but meeting Martin was fun. And I met Jessica Ransom. I told her she was the best receptionist because I did like her the best. And met Bert,
Oh, fun.
Ian McNeese.
Yeah, nice.
So he's a
Cool.
nice man. I met him a few times.
Cool. Anneke, how about you?
Well, met pretty much everybody from the regular main cast, I think. I had never spoken with Mrs. Tischel, but I have seen her. I have seen a scene filming with her in it. And I haven't spoken to Ruth, but I also have seen her from very close by. But I have actually met Martin, Philippa, Jessica Ransom, Joe Panhale. He even sent me a video message when I was ill. So a personal message. Bert, of course. Who did I miss? Kathy? Everybody. I'm pretty much everybody, I think.
Yeah,
How about
Anneke is very friendly. She meets everybody. Whereas I'm fairly shy, so I'm not, I don't put myself out there. Although I did talk to Philippa one time and told her how impressed I was with all the work she had done and how happy I was that she had done it. And she's always very serious looking. But when I spoke to her, she goes, "Oh, that is so nice to hear. I'm glad to hear that you like it. You appreciate my work." And, I talked with Martin once or twice. With Mrs. Tischel, we were walking down the street and she was with someone else and said, "I wonder what that flower is." And I went, "I know what that is."
That's funny. That's funny. Philippa might feel like my poor husband does with me because I'm like the mayor of every town. I talk to everybody, and my poor husband is, so I would imagine Martin's the outgoing one, and maybe she's a little shy. Who knows? I obviously haven't met anyone, right? But I did see Selena Cadell in The Tempest when we were visiting London in December of 2024. And she was the best part about it. She was excellent.
I also met the dog, Dodger, and her carer.
Nice.
I was actually invited by Sonia Turner, who is, or was, sadly to say, the caregiver of Dodger, and Paddy, and also Taffy, who plays Chicken in the series. And that was really wonderful to be invited to see. And she made the dogs do all kind of tricks for me. That was really nice.
That would probably be me. Like if I were over there, I would just be with all the dogs. Okay.
There
let's see.
are a lot of dogs. And
Yep.
one of the people in our Washington, D.C. meetup group knitted a warming sweater for Dodger. And it says, "Dog, Martin."
Is that the yellow one that looks like the sweater? That's fantastic. I saw a picture of that.
Yes, and so we gave that to Martin. And, he's very good about being very interested in his fans, and he's very attentive to whoever's talking to him. And I thought, oh, yeah, he's good. But he loved it. He was in and out and, put it on the dog, then came back and took pictures, and then he went back in and he did something else and he came back out. I think he really liked that.
That's very cool.
It was fun.
And did you guys bring home any souvenirs?
I brought home some mugs. I brought home a lampshade that has the picture of the village on it,
Oh, nice.
a poster. I brought home a little crab. There's a shop that sells brass things. And I got one of their crabs. Crabs are my thing. I have crabs all over my house
Okay.
because I'm a crab, so you know.
Oh, funny. My thing
So
is anchors, so if I go back there, I'll have to find an anchor.
yeah, he could have
You will
had
find
some.
it.
Yeah. I mean, how about you, Oliver? Did you get anything from there?
No, just a jacket.
Yeah. That was my thing. Since I'm wearing it, I'll display it.
I love it.
That was from the boathouse, and then they were having a fundraiser for the RNLI, and so I'll see if I can remove this from the wall for a second. Hang on.
Yeah, Bert usually, or Ian McNeese usually sponsors that, doesn't he?
This was different because this happened after the fact,
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Right.
so I bought that print and had it shipped in from England and then framed at a local shop. And I will give proper credit to that with text when I edit this video. The man is very nice, and it's his father's work, and so some of the proceeds were going to the RNLI.
Yeah,
I think that I have at least nearly 10,000 photos, pictures,
Yes.
and actually, for the rest, I brought more souvenirs from the Netherlands than
No.
I brought back from souvenirs from Port Isaac home. I think because
It was good that you had your car so that you could carry all those, right?
I don't know how many packages of stroopwafels into the UK. I think I had a whole box of stroopwafels or something like that, Kathy. Don't you think?
lots of them. I
Yeah.
would like to say sea glass.
Oh yeah, sea glass.
Spent a lot of time looking for sea glass. I have bottles full of them.
Nice.
And there were less and less on the shores, huh?
Yeah. It's tough to find sea glass. I'm 7 blocks from the ocean, and I just don't have enough diligence to go look because there's just not a lot of it on our side of the Atlantic coast. I don't know why. But is there anything that you guys wanted to share? Oliver, go for it.
There's just one little thing that I'd like to share. So in 2014, which was not a year to filming, I had breast cancer. One of my in the various chat rooms or whatever, people were getting addresses for Philippa and Martin. One of my friends who lives in Arizona wrote Martin and Philippa because they knew about me by then because I had submitted the convention idea. I didn't know that my friend had done that. And all of a sudden, I'm recovering from surgery and all that in the midst of a lot of emotion. And on my doorstep one morning was a package from England. And I don't even know if it had a return address, but they sent me a real nice card from Martin, and they sent me a couple of Buckham Fair t-shirts.
How nice.
Yeah. And the next time I saw him, I told him about it. To thank him. That was probably the only time I've really ever talked to him. And because I said, you sent me this after I had cancer and all this, and it was to make me feel better, right? And like a get well card. I think I said get well card. And he said, well, did it work? And I said, yeah, it did. It was a real joy of a moment to see that they had sent me that. It was very
That is sweet. Yeah.
Well, Oliver, I have a similar story. I also had breast cancer, and someone wrote to Martin that I had breast cancer. And same as you, I suddenly received an envelope from the UK. And I was like, well, who do I know in the UK? Especially who do I know in Dorset? And he sent me a card, and which I really like. He sent me a recipe from the Portwenn surgery.
wow.
Oh, that's funny.
That's so sweet.
It is called medicine juice, and he wrote in the card that they always had a lot of fun in preparing this ceramics things during the filming, and he always called it the medicine juice with the guy who did the props and things.
It is funny to think about how many medical terms he had to utter in 10 seasons, and in the background he's calling it medicine juice.
Yeah. And he also made me a drawing of the only thing he can draw. That's what he said. He made me an elephant bum.
Yeah.
The behind
That's
of an
so
element.
sweet. Yes, I think he put it on my car too.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, it made me laugh.
It
Yeah.
really did make me feel good. It was like a little healing moment. I don't know, for me it was. Yeah.
Yeah. That's very nice.
Yep.
That's great. Now, Kathy, I think you got around England in a very interesting manner, didn't you?
Well, the first 2 times we rented a car, and then we flew into Bristol. Some friends of ours picked us up, and we spent some time in Bath, and then they drove us down to Port Isaac. But in order to get back, we took a taxi from Port Isaac up to Bristol, which really wasn't any more expensive than taking the 2 people on the train, plus the taxi to get to the Bodmin station and whatnot.
Deal. That's great.
And then if you know what driving is like in Cornwall, I think Oliver mentioned it. It's not a day at the beach. It's hard.
Yeah.
Anneke seems to do fine, but I did not do fine.
Yeah.
I didn't mind driving on the left side of the road, but what was the bothersome was that the roads are so narrow.
Oh my God.
Remember that we had this bus coming towards us on the very
Yes, yes.
narrow road in to Trajana.
I was not there during filming, but Chris and I went in, I guess we were there early May of 2024 because I didn't start watching the show till 2023. But we actually did reproduce Martin's initial day where he flies down the coast of Cornwall and lands at Newquay. And then we drove up to Tintagel and we stayed at the Camelot Castle Hotel, which is where he had his interview. And then we just spent one night there, and we were in the room next to Mrs. Tishel, the room that they thought Mrs. Tishel was in. And then we drove down the next day to Port Isaac and we stayed in the surgery. When we drove down from Tintagel, of course, I'm telling my husband the whole time, stay left, right? And it's very disconcerting when you are the passenger in England because you are sitting in the driver's seat if you're not used to that. And you feel like you should be in control, but you have no controls. And you're in these roads where the hedges are right here, and behind the hedges is like granite walls, and there's people coming at you, and you have to be very good at backing up. So it really is it's a interesting experience. But because we were trying to stay to the left, we ended up hitting a pothole and we got a flat tire. Now, this is an interesting story in the sense that we're in the rain, it's getting dark. Thank God, we're on these single narrow roads with sometimes no cell service. But when we got our flat tire, we were on a 2-lane road right beside a store with 3G cell service. So we pull into their parking lot. I start calling because thank God the woman who rented us the car talked us into the end-to-end coverage package. Highly recommend. And the people in the store were so kind. They were closing and they told us, look, when you leave, just put the chain across the road and we'll come back later and we'll lock it. But you guys stay as long as you need to. We were negotiating how to get the car moved. And they sent a flatbed, and the flatbed drivers, this is just a little lesson you learn about Port Isaac. I'm supposed to tow you to where you're staying, which was Fern Cottage, the surgery, but my truck doesn't fit through the town. So I can get you as far as the car park, and then you can walk. It's half a mile in the rain and the dark with your luggage. Or you have run flat tires, so you can drive that little half mile. And then tomorrow, we'll send a guy out to change your tire. So anyway, we decided to drive. We drove over there, creeping through the streets of Port Isaac on our flat tire, and we park at Fern Cottage, and you actually park on the terrace. Wow. So they never have a car there in the show, but that's where you park. There's very limited parking there. And then staying in Fern Cottage was wild because, of course, it looks nothing like the TV show because they use the exterior and a tiny bit of the interior. They use what is actually the dining room a couple times in the early episodes. If you recall when Melanie comes in with the Cocker Spaniel, who I think was Mary Elizabeth Clunes, I believe, she's actually coming in the dining room window, which is low to the ground. And then every time we would walk outside of Fern Cottage, we would kind of pay attention. That you try to get out when there weren't people there, which was virtually impossible because people are there all the time. But everyone thought we owned the house. So we would walk out and they'd be like, oh, we love your house. We love your house. I'm like, we're just the renters. But that's my little Port Isaac contribution to this conversation. But,
Yeah, some of us got to go inside there gratis of some of the people who were staying. They said, oh, well, come on in and look at the cottage. And so we went through,
Nice. Yeah. Yes.
And the other things, and I don't know if you want to put this in the podcast, but when you're driving through around Cornwall, whenever we were going to go someplace, I always looked online to see what kind of roads they were going to be, because GPS took you on the most direct road, which may be a lane that was this wide.
That's right.
And I always made sure to stay on the B road, so I would have 2 lanes and enough room to not, scrape the car up.
Even the Bs don't all have 2 lanes.
Well, but they're better than the teeny
Yes.
tiny ones.
They are. I agree.
My first trip, I didn't have GPS. So 2011. And I didn't know anything about getting down to Port Isaac. I had a friend whose husband is British. And so I was talking to her about it. And she suggested I rent a car in Exeter. I didn't know about Beaminster or anything. And so I drove all the way from Exeter. I got this car and it was right outside the train station, and I bought 2 different maps of Cornwall and Essex, I guess it's called, and where Exeter is. And so it was terrifying. The guy said, I said, what about, he didn't offer insurance, or he didn't bring it up, but I did. I said, he said, I said, do you have insurance? And he said, yeah, I got this level, and this level. And I said, I want the top level, the most expensive.
Yes.
And so while I was driving around Cornwall on that trip, not the same day, but I went in and I was going to park. I wasn't going to try to drive in the town, so I was parking in the lot, and there was a line for the lot. All of a sudden, I hear somebody banging on my window, and of course, I'm like trying to find the way to turn the car, put the window down because it's usually here and like in the car and this. So finally, I put it down, and he said, "What is wrong with you?" I said, he had been behind me on the road, and he said, "What is wrong with you?" I said, "I don't know." And then he said, "Are you drunk?" And first thing I said, "No, I'm doing the best I can." And he said, "Oh, you're a tourist. Well, that's all right then."
Sweet. That's good.
But he didn't explain what you were doing, what he found weird?
And he told me I was all over the road. And I was all over the road, Anneke.
That's funny.
I was. And when I took the car back to Exeter, there was something wrong with it. I had done something to it. And I had to remind him that I was paying for the insurance. He goes, this thing is messed up. And I was like, I know.
Yeah.
Because those roads are bouncy, and I felt like I had to go faster than I really wanted to.
Yes.
That was the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, the edges of the road are hazardous because they're not, it's not like it's a pavement that's smooth on the edge. It's all jagged. So.
But you have an advantage if you're driving with a foreign set of license plates, because from far away they could recognize my Dutch plates, and then they took me in consideration, a tourist, and
Right.
then they were nice to me.
It makes sense.
Mhm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but as we've been told by Auntie Joan, there's bags of room, and there is not. There are not bags of room.
Well, I want to give a little bit of an advertisement here. I knew Oliver before I went because we were in the same meetup group in DC. Anneke I met through fan fiction.
Mhm.
So we hadn't actually met each other, but we'd corresponded for at least a year, maybe 2, before we met in Port Isaac. And if anybody out there hasn't read fan fiction for Doc Martin, you should give it a try.
Yeah. If you're
Absolutely.
missing the show, it's a great way to kind of keep it alive. So if you guys have enjoyed watching this or listening to this podcast, I hope that you will like it online and subscribe to the feed. Share it with people you think might be interested. That goes for any episode of the podcast or the whole podcast itself. I'll be looking for new ideas. I'll be looking for new people to guest. So if you're interested, put something in the comments. And again, thank you again for watching. Take care. Thanks for joining Podcast Portwenn. Podcast Portwenn is an independent fan production, not affiliated with, endorsed by, or sponsored by Buffalo Pictures, ITV, Fox, or the creators of Doc Martin or Best Medicine.